One more time, very loudly, meaning it. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,
So, Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Guru Maharaj. Today we have Gopika Radhika Mataji, who is going to enlighten us in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 13, verse 55 to 57. Hare Krishna, Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to you. So, Mataji, just realized that it's only one devotee today. So, what do you suggest?
I'm at your service, Prabhuji. Whatever you say, whatever you think is, I'm okay with.
Should we continue or should we like cancel it? Like whatever you suggest, Mataji. Normally we have at least 4 or 5 devotees.
Yes, yes, I know.
I think first time I am seeing in my this whole duration since I started, it's only 3 of us.
I am finding it okay if you don't want to do it. It's 100% okay for me if you
Yeah.
can't do it.
I will leave this decision to Gopika Radhika
Yes.
Mataji. It's her. Actually, she is the in charge in that way.
Yes.
Whatever Mataji you would like to, please. We'll go with your decision.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, okay, then maybe we'll just go with the class, and why not? I suppose Maharaj would like that. Okay.
So we should continue, Mataji. Sorry, your voice is little.
Yeah. I was just thinking maybe, I mean, that's what Maharaj would like best. So let's just
Sure.
continue the class.
Sure. Thank you, Mataji. Thank you. So I will open the. I will make you co-host so you can share the screen here. So you can share the screen, Mataji, now. Over to you. Thank you very much. You are on mute, Mataji. I can't hear.
Oh,
No,
yeah,
like, yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay, so the plan was to discuss verses 55, 56, and 57
Yeah.
of the 13th chapter of the first canto. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this is still Narada continuing to speak to Maharaj Yudhishthir and the rest of the Pandavas. Narada is saying, Vidyanatmani Sanyojya, Kshetrage Pravilapyatam, Brahmanyatmanam Adhare, Bhatambaram Ivambar. Translation. Dhritarashtra will have to amalgamate his pure identity with intelligence and then merge into the Supreme Being with knowledge of his qualitative oneness as a living entity with the Supreme Brahman. Being freed from the blocked sky, he will have to rise to the spiritual sky. Purport. The living being, by his desiring to lord it over the material world and declining to cooperate with the Supreme Lord, contacts the sum total of the material world, namely the Mahatattva, and from the Mahatattva, his false identity with the material world, intelligence, mind, and senses is developed. This covers his pure spiritual identity. By the yogic process, when his pure identity is realized in self-realization, one has to revert to the original position by amalgamating the 5 gross elements and the subtle elements, mind and intelligence, into the Mahatattva again. Thus, getting freed from the clutches of the Mahatattva, he has to merge in the existence of the Supersoul. In other words, he has to realize that qualitatively he is non-different from the Supersoul. And thus he transcends the material sky by his pure identical intelligence, and thus becomes engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. This is the highest perfectional development of spiritual identity, which was attained by Dhritarashtra by the grace of Vidur and the Lord. The Lord's mercy was bestowed upon him by his personal contact with Vidura. And when he was actually practicing the instructions of Vidur, the Lord helped him to attain the highest perfectional stage. A pure devotee of the Lord does not live on any planet of the material sky, nor does he feel any contact with material elements. His so-called material body does not exist, being surcharged with the spiritual current of the Lord's identical interest, and thus he is permanently freed from all contaminations of the sum total of the Mahat Tattva. He is always in the spiritual sky, which he attains by being transcendental to the sevenfold material coverings, by the effect of his devotional service. The conditioned souls are within the coverings, whereas the liberated soul is far beyond the cover. Then we have verse 56. Again, Narad Muni continuing. Dvasta Maya Gunodarko Niruddha Karanashayah Nirvatita Khilahara Aste Sthano Rivachalah Tasyantarayo Meva Bhuh Sanyasta Khila Karmanaha. Translation. He will have to suspend all the actions of the senses, even from the outside, and will have to be impervious to interactions of the senses, which are influenced by the modes of material nature. After renouncing all material duties, he must become immovably established beyond all sources of hindrances on the path. Purport. Dhritarashtra had attained by the yogic process the stage of negation of all sorts of material reaction. The effects of the material modes of nature draw the victim to indefatigable desires of enjoying matter. But one can escape such false enjoyment by the yogic process. Every sense is always busy in searching for its food, and thus the conditioned soul is assaulted from all sides and has no chance to become steady in any pursuit. Maharaj Yudhishthir was advised by Narad not to disturb his uncle by attempting to bring him back home. He was now beyond the attraction of anything material. The material modes of nature, the gunas, have their different modes of activities, but above the material modes of nature is a spiritual mode, which is absolute. Nirguna means without reaction. The spiritual mode and its effect are identical. Therefore, the spiritual quality is distinguished from its material counterpart by the word nirguna. After complete suspension of the material modes of nature, one is admitted to the spiritual sphere. An action dictated by the spiritual modes is called devotional service or bhakti. Bhakti is therefore nirguna, attained by direct contact with the Absolute. And then we have the final verse where Narad Muni is describing about Dhritarashtra's departure. Sarva adyatanad rajan paratah panchamehani kalevaram hasyati swam tacha bhasmi bhavishyati. O king, he'll quit his body, most probably on the 5th day from today, and his body will turn to ashes. Purport. Narad Muni's prophecy prohibited Yudhishthir Maharaj from going to the place where his uncle was staying, because even after quitting the body by his own mystic power, Dhritarashtra would not be in any need of any funeral ceremony. Narad Muni indicated that his body by itself would burn to ashes. The perfection of the yoga system is attained by such mystic power. The yogi is able to quit his body by his own choice of time and can attain any planet he desires by turning the present body into ashes by self-made fire. So yeah, it's basically these 3 verses where Narad Muni is, as Prabhupada points out, he's prophesizing, because this is all in future tense, if you notice. It's all that Dhritarashtra will do this, Dhritarashtra will do that. So because Narad Muni, he is Trikalagya, he can see past, present, and future. So although these things have not yet taken place, but he's telling Maharaj Yudhishthir what lies in store in the future with respect to his uncle and aunt, Dhritarashtra and Gandhari. So yeah, just reading the translations once more, because this whole explanation is quite technical. So Narad Muni says Dhritarashtra will have to amalgamate his pure identity with intelligence and then merge into the Supreme Being with knowledge of his qualitative oneness as a living entity with the Supreme Brahman. Being freed from the blocked sky, he will have to rise to the spiritual sky. Then he says, he'll have to suspend all the actions of the senses, even from the outside, and will have to be impervious to the interactions of the senses, which are influenced by the modes of material nature. After renouncing all material duties, he must become immovably established beyond all sources of hindrances on the path. And the final culminating verse, O king, he will quit his body most probably on the 5th day from today, and his body will turn to ashes. So yeah, it's a pretty technical explanation, this one, of Dhritarashtra's process of quitting his material body. So I just thought to initially start our discussion by discussing this whole yogic process of departure and looking at other examples from Srimad Bhagavatam of other exalted personalities who adopted the same process. So that kind of sheds further light into this whole mechanism and just makes it more clear. So in terms of the basics of this whole thing, we can go back to the Bhagavad Gita, where Lord Krishna, he tells Arjun in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, verses 4, 5, and 6. So Krishna says, firstly, Bhumirapo nalo vayo khamano buddhirevacha ahankara iti yamme bhinna prakriti rashtadha. That earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Altogether, these 8 constitute my separated material energies. So here we get a list of all the material elements that are in existence. Everything that is pervading in this material world is composed of one or more of these 8 elements. This comprises the entirety of material existence. Then in the next verse, Krishna says, Aparayam itastvanyam prakritim vidhi me param jiva bhuta mahabaho yayedam dharete jagat. So Krishna says, besides these, so besides those 8 material elements, O mighty armed Arjuna, there's another superior energy of mine which comprises the living entities who are exploiting the resources of this material inferior nature. So that means us living entities. We are the spiritual sparks currently confined within these material bodies, but we ourselves, the spirit soul, is of a spiritual nature, and therefore it's Krishna's superior energy. And we are the ones who are exploiting the resources of the material inferior nature, this world of 8 elements. And then the concluding verse in this series, Krishna says, Etad yunini bhutani sarvani tyupadharaya aham kritsnasya jagatah prabhavah pralayas tatha. All created beings have their source in these 2 natures. Of all that is material and all that is spiritual in this world, know for certain that I am both the origin and the dissolution. Bhagavad Gita 7. So yeah, all created beings have their source in these 2 natures, right? Because we ourselves are the spirit soul, the spiritual sparks, part and parcel of Krishna. And we are confined in these material bodies, which are made of a combination of the 8 material elements. So all of us created beings have our source in these 2 natures, the inferior energy, material nature, and the superior energy, our real self, the spirit soul. And then Krishna distinguishes himself by saying that of all that is material and all that is spiritual, Krishna, the one supreme personality of Godhead, is the creator as well as the destroyer, the origin and the dissolution. So basically, in one sense, in just these 3 succinct verses, Krishna describes everything that exists in the entire creation, whether spiritual or material, including God himself. You get the entire picture of everything in existence. It's like a theory of everything over here, the constituent parts and the whole. So 8 material elements, the spiritual spark. Spiritual spark is imprisoned in a cage comprised of the 8 elements. And there is God, the Supreme Personality, who is the origin and the dissolution of all. So with this foundational understanding, then it becomes easier to understand the process, the yogic process, adopted by Dhritarashtra and various other personalities in terms of departing from this material world comprised of 8 elements. So if we look at other examples from the Bhagavatam, where other personalities also adopted the same process, we have, for example, Maharaj Harishchandra. Bhagavatam describes this in 9, 7, 25, 26, where we find something very similar to today's series of verses. It says Maharaj Harishchandra first purified his mind, which was full of material enjoyment, by amalgamating it with the earth. Then he amalgamated the earth with water, the water with fire, the fire with the air, and the air with the sky. Thereafter, he amalgamated the sky with the total material energy, and the total material energy with spiritual knowledge. This spiritual knowledge is realization of one's self as part of the Supreme Lord. When the self-realized spiritual soul is engaged in service to the Lord, he is eternally imperceptible and inconceivable. Thus established in spiritual knowledge, he is completely freed from material bondage. So yeah, a process very similar to Dhritarashtra. He amalgamated his mind with the earth, then the earth with the water with fire, the fire with air, air with the sky, and the sky with the total material energy, which means the Mahatattva, which Prabhupada describes in today's verse, and the total material energy with spiritual knowledge. Then we have another example. We'll get to the details of this in a few minutes. So here we have another example. This is of Maharaj Prithu, who we find from the Bhagavatam that he was a direct incarnation of the Supreme Lord himself. He was a Shakti Avesh avatar, an empowered incarnation of Krishna himself. So here Maharaj Prithu's departure is described. That when Maharaj Prithu practiced a particular yogic sitting posture, he blocked the door of his anus with his ankles, pressed his right and left calves, and gradually raised his life air upward, passing it on to the circle of his navel, up to his heart and throat, and finally pushed it upward to the central position between his 2 eyebrows. In this way, Prithu Maharaj gradually raised his air of life up to the hole in his skull, whereupon he lost all desire for material existence. And gradually, again, we have the same process here. He merged his air of life with the totality of air, his body with the totality of earth, and the fire within his body with the totality of fire. In this way, according to the different positions of the various parts of the body, Prithu Maharaj merged the wholes of his senses with the sky, his bodily liquids such as blood and various secretions with the totality of water, and he merged earth with water, then water with fire, fire with air, air with sky, and so on. Same thing we saw with Harishchandra Maharaj and with King Dhritarashtra. He amalgamated the mind with the senses and the senses with the sense objects according to their respective positions. And he also amalgamated the material ego with the total material energy, Mahatattva. Prithu Maharaj then offered the total designation of the living entity unto the supreme controller of illusory energy. Being released from all the designations by which the living entity became entrapped, he became free by knowledge and renunciation, and by the spiritual force of his devotional service. In this way, being situated in his original constitutional position of Krishna consciousness, he gave up this body as a Prabhu, or a controller of the senses. So now that we have seen a few different examples of personalities quitting their bodies through this yogic process in the very same way that Dhritarashtra did, and we look at this foundational knowledge of what are the 8 material elements, our own constitutional position as a spiritual spark distinct from the material elements, and the position of Krishna as the creator and destroyer of everything that is material and spiritual. Now we come to Prabhupada's explanations in various purports. For example, this is from Prithu Maharaj's section, where Prabhupada sheds further light on this whole process, what exactly it entails and how this process works. So here Prabhupada is saying that the aim of this particular system of asana, known as the sitting posture for liberation or muktasana, is to attain success in Kundalini Chakra, and gradually raise the life from the Muladhara chakra to the Swadhisthana chakra, then to the Manipura chakra, the Anahat chakra, the Vishuddha chakra, and finally to the Agya chakra. When the yogi reaches the Agya chakra between the two eyebrows, he is able to penetrate the Brahmarantra, or the hole in his skull. So we all have, there is a potential hole in the skull, which is called the Brahmarantra. So the yogi basically moves his life airs all the way up to that hole. And from there, go to any planet he desires, up to the spiritual kingdom of Vaikuntha or Krishna. So it's a conscious process, like the rest of us, we just die by the forces of nature. Whenever our moment of death arrives by destiny, at that time we are compelled to quit our bodies. But here we have these personalities who have perfected the yogic system to such an extent that they can take a conscious decision of when to die, and then they execute this whole mechanism of raising their life pairs, knowingly, consciously raising their life pairs all the way up to Brahmarantra, the hole in the skull, and then at that time making a conscious decision of which way they want to proceed, and which can even include up to Vaikuntha or Krishna. That's up to the yogi. What is the yogi's desires? What are his goals? So in that way, and then the spirit soul, the pure spirit soul, makes a conscious decision of where the person wants to go after quitting that material body, and he consciously goes there. So here, this is another purport from Prabhupada, where Prabhupada is elaborating on the same process. Prabhupada says, in Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd canto, 5th chapter, Lord Brahma clearly explained to Narad how the creation took place. And he explained one step after another the proper divisions of the senses, the controller of the senses, the objects of the senses, and the material elements. And he also explained how they are created one after another. The air from the sky, the fire from the air, the water from the fire, the earth from the water, etc. So this is really interesting. We saw that Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that there are 8 material elements. And here Prabhupada is referring back to the 2nd canto, where Lord Brahma explains to Narad how the sequence of creation takes. So these 8 material elements, they unfold one from the other. They are created one after another. The air from the sky, the fire from the air, the water from the fire, the earth from the water, etc. So basically what happens when these yogis, they are quitting their bodies is that they reverse precisely this process of creation. Just as from the air from the sky, air comes, and then from air, fire is created, from fire, water is created, from water, earth is created. Now this process goes back in reverse. So similarly, here Prabhupada continues, the living entity, after entering the womb of a mother, also collects his gross and subtle bodies, taking ingredients from the totality of sky, air, fire, water, and earth. The word yathasthanam vibhagashaha indicates that one should know the process of creation and should meditate upon the creative process inversely, so in reverse order, and thus become free from material contamination. So the process of quitting the body is like an equivalent of the process of destruction, right? Because one is destroying, in one sense, the material body. So at that time, the same sequence in which creation takes place, that sequence is reversed by the yogi. And in that way, the body, which is made of 8 material elements, each element in that body is returned back to the source. Like the earth element, which is present in our body, is returned back to the overall element of earth. The water element that is present in our body is returned to the overall reservoir, or the overall source, the reservoir of water element in this material world. In this way, each element is returned back to its source, and then all that is left is the pure spirit soul. And the pure spirit soul then chooses to go, makes a conscious decision to go wherever they want. So this is another purport. Prabhupada is saying the creation is so arranged that cause and effect follow one after the other. So the merging process we saw in today's purport, Dhritarashtra is doing the same thing, the merging process. One thing being merged into the other, then into the other, then into the other. So the merging process involves amalgamating the effect with the original cause. So yeah, as Prabhupada says here, right? For example, the air comes from the sky. So the sky is the sky is the cause of air, which is the effect. So when the yogi is quitting the body, he returns each effect into its cause. The whole sequence is going backwards. So the merging process involves amalgamating the effect with the original cause. And since the ultimate cause in the material world is Mahat Tattva, so, Mahat Tattva is that amorphous, homogeneous combination of all the material elements put together, everything material put together. Since the ultimate cause in the material world is Mahat Tattva, everything was gradually wound up and amalgamated with the Mahat Tattva. So that ultimately all that is left is the spirits. No confinement of the material body remains. There is no more bondage of the material elements on that pure spirit anymore. So, yeah, this is a really nice quote from one of Prabhupada's lectures where Prabhupada makes this even more clear. Prabhupada is saying, this is Bhagavad Gita 2.11, August 17, 1973, London. So Prabhupada is saying this body is moving very nicely because the living force is there, which is our present condition right now. We are talking, we are moving, we are walking, we are doing so many things. The material elements body is moving because we, the spirit souls, are residing within the body. Then, and as soon as the living force is gone out, this nice body will no longer move. This is the condition of any dead body. The living force is gone out, so the body does not move any longer. It will decompose. Dust thou art, dust thou beest. Earth, water, fire, air, sky. These 5 gross elements are the ingredients of this body. So as soon as the soul is out of this body, Prabhupada is referring to this famous law, which is recognized even by modern physicists today, conservation of the energy. So we actually have this concept originally in our scriptures. The earthly energy goes to the earth. The waterly energy goes to the water. It is a combination. The body, that means, is a combination of earth, water, air, fire. So they become decomposed and become distributed to different elements. And that is the scientific law. It is called conservation of energy. The energy is never lost. It comes back again to the original stock. So this process, which in the case of us, common people, it takes place by the laws of nature, the force of nature. The yogi, the people who are advanced in the yogic practice, they are able to execute this process consciously. They can take a decision to, okay, I want to do this today, and they'll execute the whole process. So that is the ability that the practice of yoga lends to a living entity. So this is one aspect in today's verse that I thought to discuss a bit, Dhritarashtra's yogic process of quitting his body. So now this explanation of the process then brings us to another important point which Prabhupada brings up in his purpose, which is the difference between the Mayavadi understanding of quitting the body versus a devotee's understanding of quitting the body. Because we see, there's a lot of description of, one thing merging into the other, another thing merging into the next. And finally, the living entities merging, seemingly merging into the Supreme. So what exactly does it mean? Is it really merging or something else? So here we have Prabhupada in Srimad Bhagavatam 6.434 purport, where Prabhupada is saying there is no difference between God and the living entity, except that the living entity is under designation, whereas the absolute has no designation. In their opinion means in the opinion of the impersonalists, the Mayavadi, as soon as the designations of the material body are dissolved, the jiva, the living entity, will mix with the Supreme. They give the argument of Ghatakash Patakash, in which the body is compared to a pot with the sky within and the sky without. When the pot breaks, the sky inside becomes one with the sky outside. And so the impersonalists say that the living being becomes one with the Supreme. So this is the Mayavadi argument that, seemingly, okay, we are the spirit soul, Right now, we are imprisoned, we are encaged within this prison house comprising of the 8 material elements. So as soon as this prison house breaks apart, then the spirit soul merges with the Supreme Spirit. Like there is space, empty space within a pot, and there is empty space without a pot, outside of the pot. So once the pot breaks, then the empty space within the pot becomes one with the empty space outside the pot. There is no difference. There is no interior and exterior of the pot. Everything is one now. The pot is finished, so the space is now all one. That is the Mayavadi argument. So similarly, they say that we jivas, we become one with the Supreme as soon as the material body falls apart. But then we have the Vaishnava understanding regarding the same, which is, and we find numerous verses to substantiate the Vaishnava understanding that the living entity does not become one with the Supreme. Everyone retains their individuality. Every person retains his or her individuality eternally. So this is from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter very early on in the Gita, Bhagavad Gita 2:12, where Krishna says to Arjun, Natvevaham jatunasam natvam neme janadhipaha, na chaiva na bhavishyamaha sarve vayamataha param. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. So this verse is such a clear evidence of the fact that a living entity never loses his or her individuality. We always remain individual spirit souls. And God, Krishna, is another individual personality. And we are also individual people eternally. Because Krishna is saying, in the past also, Krishna, Arjun, and all these other kings, they were all existing. And in the future also, all of them will continue to exist. It is not that in the future, everyone will die, and then they will get liberation and become one. Everything will become one. No, everyone will continue to be. No one will cease to exist, even in the future. So in the purport, Prabhupada is saying, the Lord says clearly that he himself, Arjun, and all the kings who are assembled on the battlefield are eternally individual beings. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the supreme individual person. And Arjuna, the Lord's eternal associate, and all the kings assembled there are individual eternal persons. It is not that they did not exist as individuals in the past, and it is not that they will not remain eternal persons. Their individuality existed in the past, and their individuality will continue in the future without interruption. So this is one of the many verses in our scriptures which confirm the Vaishnava understanding of the individuality of the soul. Then we have another, again from the Bhagavad Gita 15:7, where Krishna says, Mamaivansho jiva loke jiva bhutaha sanatana mana shashthani driyani prakriti sthani karshiti. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. So Krishna is saying 2 things here. Mamaivansho, which means that each living entity is an ansha, a portion, a tiny part and parcel, fragmental part of Krishna. And Sanatanaha, we are eternally Krishna's fragmental parts. It is not that right now we are fragmented and later on we will become one with Krishna. No, eternally we are fragmental parts. Eternally, we are also individuals and he is also an individual. Then we have, this is right from the Upanishads, and this was a verse which Prabhupada absolutely loved to quote again and again throughout his books, lectures, everything. It's an extremely powerful verse where we get a very, very clear understanding of the individuality, and it's a very powerful refutation against Mayavad, where it is stated, Nityo Nityanam Chetanash Chetananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadhati Kaman, from the Katha Upanishad 2:13. So it's a very clear depiction over here. It says Nityo Nityanam. So Nitya, as we know, Nitya means basically eternal, permanent. So here we have Nityo, which means one eternal, and we have Nityanam, which means many eternals. So the common thing is that both are eternal, but there is one and there's many. Then we have another thing, Chetanash, Chetananam. Chetanash means someone who is conscious and cognizant. So we have one person who is conscious and cognizant, and then we have many people who are conscious and cognizant. Both are conscious and cognizant, but there is one and there is many. So then one may ask, why is the Upanishad making this distinction? If everything is eternal, everyone is, conscious and cognizant. Why one and many? One and many. What's the difference? So here is the difference. It says, Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadhati Kama. The one is maintaining and fulfilling all the desires of the many. So that is the distinction between the one and the many. That one, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the one who is maintaining all the Nityanams and the Chetananam. Even though we are eternal, like God, we are also eternal. And like God, we are also conscious people. But unlike God, we are dependent on the Lord. Krishna, he is not dependent on anyone. He is self-sufficient. He is independent. And we living entities, even though we are eternal, even though we are conscious, but we depend on that one Supreme Personality of God. That is the difference between the one and the many. So that was what Prabhupada would always say, emphasize, right? That we are qualitatively one with the Supreme, but quantitatively, there is unlimited difference between us and the Supreme Lord. Qualitatively, Krishna is also eternal, we are also eternal. Qualitatively, Krishna is also conscious, we are also conscious. But like the Prabhupada would often say, right? The drop of ocean versus the entire ocean. So the drop of the ocean, it also has the same chemical composition. It's 2 molecules of hydrogen and 1 molecule of oxygen, H2O, right? And similarly, the entire ocean water, that also has the same chemical composition, but one obviously cannot compare the drop of the ocean to the entire ocean. There's a world of difference. So here, yes, a very clear distinction is made between the Jivatma and the Supreme Lord. At no point does the living entity become one with or equal to or the same as the Supreme Lord. That difference always remains. The Supreme Lord maintains, and we are the dependents who are maintained by him. And therefore, Prabhupada would often give this analogy also of a green parrot in a green tree. That, when a green parrot flies into a green tree, then sometimes the parrot becomes almost invisible. We can no longer see the parrot because, the parrot has green feathers, the tree has green leaves. So it's impossible, almost impossible to see the parrot distinctly. But still, it does not mean that the parrot has become one with the tree, right? I mean, the tree is still the tree and the parrot is the parrot. The parrot does not become the tree. So similarly, yes, when the living entity is liberated from the material body and the living entity goes back to the spiritual world, it may apparently seem as if, oh, the living entity has gone into spiritual existence. So now the living entity is one with the Supreme. But no, that is not the case. The living entity retains one's own original identity, individuality, and the Supreme Person retains his own individuality, like the parrot and the tree. And therefore, those who aspire for simply merging into Brahman existence, they always run this risk, which Prabhupada points out. He's pointed out in many places. This is one example. 423:15 purport, where Prabhupada is saying, when a living entity gives up the material coverings, he remains a spirit soul. So this spirit soul must enter into the spiritual sky to merge into the Brahman effulgence. Unfortunately, unless the living entity has information of the spiritual world and the Vaikunthas, there is a 99.9% chance of his falling down again into material existence. So this is the big risk that a living entity runs if one does not aspire for specifically the spiritual world and the Vaikunthas. Because as Prabhupada would often point out, we living entities, we also have Krishna's qualities of Sat, Chit, and Ananda in minute quantity. So even though one may attain the quality of Sat or eternity by merging in the Brahman effulgence, that one is now free from death, one is eternal, one will never perish. But partly the Chit and specifically the Ananda component, the search for happiness, that remains unfulfilled in the Brahman effulgence. We are by nature, we are pleasure seeking. The characteristic of the spirit soul is that the spirit soul needs pleasure. The spirit soul is seeking happiness and pleasure. And that is not existing in the Brahman effulgence. That exists in the direct association of Krishna in the spiritual world and the Vaikuntras. We have this comparison. I forget the exact comparison, but Rupa Goswami, he says, just like if Brahmanand, or the happiness of merging in Brahman effulgence, if it is multiplied by, I forget the exact number, he says some big number, like if it is multiplied by hundreds of thousands of times, even then it cannot compare with even a drop of the happiness which exists in Bhakti. So there is no comparison between the Ananda derived in Brahman effulgence versus the Ananda derived as a devotee in association with Krishna, in serving Krishna. So because of that lack of Ananda, that lack of happiness, one has a 99.9% chance of falling down again. Yeah. Again, another very famous and graphic example Prabhupada gives, that if you superficially merge into God, then you will again be evaporated. So you will again, once mix up, again you will be evaporated, again you will mix up, again you will be evaporated, right? Because this is what happens in the water cycle. Water from rivers, ponds, etc., it gets evaporated, falls down as rain. That rain comes down to the oceans.
Hare Krishna,
And
Mataji,
then-
sorry. The voice is breaking. I don't know whether it's at my end or just...
Oh, okay, sorry. I'll hold my mic closer. Maybe that will help.
Thank you. Thank you, Mataji.
Yes, sure. So, yeah, the water which is merged into the ocean, that same water again comes out of the ocean through the process of evaporation. So even though one is merged once, one comes out again. But if one becomes a devotee, Prabhupada compares the devotee to the fish, a small fish within the ocean. So the small fish never gets evaporated. Even though he's a very small fish, the fish is never evaporated. The fish never comes out of the ocean. But the water which merges in the ocean, it comes out of the ocean eventually through the process of evaporation. So similarly, Prabhupada's point was that when a living entity simply merges into the Supreme, there is a chance, there is a risk always that one will fall down again to the material platform. But once one becomes a fish, or which means a resident of the spiritual world, not simply merged in the spiritual world, but a resident of the spiritual world, then there is no risk of coming out again. And therefore, Prabhupada Prabhupada refers to the process of Bhakti Yoga again and again in today's purports. And we find the same here, because we saw, this whole process of yogic departure is so complex and so technical, and no one can execute it in this age. And therefore, Prabhupada says, unless one is very expert in such yoga, the best course is to adopt the ways and means of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. Thus, one can gloriously become freed from all material contamination by the simple process of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Just as life in this material world has its beginning in material sound, similarly, a spiritual life has its beginning in this spiritual sound vibration. And through this process, as Prabhupada has mentioned numerous times, a devotee has absolutely no need to consider, the time, place, circumstances, etc. of one's departure. All that is taken care of by Krishna. So the process of bhakti, it's very easy, it's joyfully executed, and it is also the most secure and most suited for today's current day and age. So yes, Prabhuji, I would like to conclude here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mataji, for a very wonderful class. It was really very enlivening. Even topic was very technical, but you brought so many nice reference points. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. If you have any questions, comments, realizations, please do share. And you can, if if you have any questions which you would like to raise, but you cannot ask directly, you can put it on chat window. I can read on your behalf. Also, request if you can switch on your video. That would be great. Thank you. So while devotee asks any question, Mataji, one thing I was having in my mind, you gave a reference of Prathu Maharaj and Harishchandra, and also similar things for Dhritarashtra. While leaving the body, they kind of went into a yogic way, yeah, to meditate and do all this. Hare Krishna Mataji, can you hear me?
Yes, Prabhuji. Yeah, I can hear you. Yes, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, why they did not follow the devotional process rather than following the yogic process while leaving the body?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question, Prabhuji, and something I also wondered about. I think when we look at the context, in the case of Dhritarashtra, Prabhupada does make this point in one of the later purports that because he had committed offenses against the devotees, the Pandavas, so the best that he could achieve by Vidura's mercy was the state that he achieved. Like he could not have attained this absolutely perfect spiritual platform because of the Vaishnava aparadh he had committed throughout his life. In the case of other personalities, like for example, Prithu Maharaj, I guess it's this thing that sometimes the same process can be executed, but with different intentions and different purposes, different goals. So, like the same yogi, I mean, two yogis can adopt the same process, and one of them may aspire for Swargaloka, one of them may aspire for Brahmajyoti, one of them may aspire to go to Vaikuntha, and by adopting the same process. So it's like this yogic process. It was a very common feature in those times in Satya Yoga, Treta Yoga. It was just a commonplace thing that everyone took to in those. It was something which everyone practiced. Everyone was very expert in this thing. So that was the common thing to do for people during those days. What place they aspire to go to after quitting the body, I guess, depended from individual to individual. But the mechanistic process, like I guess even for things like, we can say that when we fall sick, we go to, a normal doctor or a hospital. Earlier, when people firstly, they rarely felt sick, they had other ways to cure their sickness. So basically, it did not have much to do with being a devotee or not a devotee. It was basically just a procedure, that was the procedure which was followed. So similarly, for quitting the body, this was the procedure that was followed. But those who were devotees would do it with a sense of devotion for Krishna, with a sense of dependence on Krishna, and with an aspiration to rejoin Krishna in the spiritual world. Whereas others would probably have other aspirations, attain mystic siddhis or merge in Brahmajyoti, etc. In that way.
Yeah. Thank you, Mataji. Thank you. It makes really sense. Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yes, Scarlett Mataji, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, thank you very, very much for this class. I have learned some things. Some other I have to study it again to understand it exactly what it means and so on. You mentioned about the Vaikuntha, and even if we get to Vaikuntha, it's not 100% sure that we can continue, but we are going to come back again. Have I understood?
No, that was Brahmajyoti, not Vaikuntha. With Vaikuntha or any spiritual planet, it is confirmed that one will not come back again.
Okay.
But when one's
But what I don't understand, Jai or Vijay, they were in Vaikuntha, right?
Yes, yes,
But
yes.
then they send it because they did something unknowingly. They were taking care of everything about Vishnu and was really devotion to Vishnu, right?
Yes, yes,
And
you're
and
right.
then and then they did this to for Kumaras, and they got cursed. I mean, how is it possible that they were pure devotees and they
Yeah,
didn't do it as a spy or as a bad action
intention.
or anything? It was unknowingly. Still, they got cursed and they got to go through it. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
How is it?
yeah,
How should I understand that? Thank you.
yeah, yeah. Thank you, Mataji. Thank you for that question. In fact, I mean, Vidur asks Maitreya Rishi the same question in the third canto of the Bhagavatam, which eventually then, is described in the seventh canto. And with Hiranyakshipu and Hiranyaksh, etc. But yeah, I guess here, if we look at the background picture of what was, really happening with the Lord and his associates, was that it is described that actually Krishna, he wanted to have a chance to fight. Like, a sportsman wants a good game. So similarly, Krishna, he's the supreme warrior, he's the most powerful person. He wanted to have the sport of fighting. And now, because Krishna is God, obviously, he's not going to interact with some ordinary demon. Krishna directly interacts only with those who are his devotees. So, but then how can he fight with a devotee? He will obviously not fight with a devotee. So Jay and Vijay, actually, they wanted to perform this service for the Lord. That, okay, our Lord wants a chance to fight, so we will offer the service to the Lord. So actually, that was the background pastime behind this whole incident. So externally, it seems that yes, they did something unknowingly and they get cursed, and then they come down to the material world. But actually, it was the Lord's arrangement. It was the Lord's arrangement for his pastime, in which his devotees were also participating because they wanted to offer the service to the Lord. And then, they come down as Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksh in the first birth, and, which is Varahadev and Narsimhadev. They kill Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksh. Then we have Ravan and Kumbhakaran, who are killed by Lord Ram and Lakshman. And then we have Shishupal and Dantavakra, who are killed by Krishna. So in 3 consecutive births, they take birth as the most powerful, most amazing demons in this material world, and Krishna gets to fight with them, challenge them, and kill them. And that was the sporting relation between Krishna and his devotee. So it was actually Krishna's arrangement that this thing happened. It was not an accident. It was Krishna's arrangement for his pastime, and his devotees, Jay and Vijay, they also wanted to give this service to the Lord. So that is why this whole thing was actually done. Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you, Mataji. Namta Mataji, please go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mataji.
I'm not at my place, so I'm sorry I'm not switching my camera on because I'm in the crowd. I'm
Sure.
just, yeah, thank you. So, a very wonderful class, Mataji. Lot of clarifications. I was really amazed to have this class. Thank you. We'll look
Thank
forward
you.
to hear it again.
Thank you so much.
You have already actually some question raised in between, but then you quite covered up in your lecture by giving the evaporation example and the fish example. So thank you for that. Just one small doubt that I'm still little unclear on how devotee like I'm clear on the impersonal aspect and the Mayavadi mentality, how the soul travels in that consciousness. Okay, a little bit clear. I cannot say totally clear, but yes, a little bit clear. But then when it comes to a devotee, what is the relation? What is the bridging thing that when the devotee comes out of the cycle of birth and death, and attains the liberation, the 5 liberations, one of the 5 liberations. How
Yeah,
does
yeah.
that happen?
Okay, how does that happen in the sense of?
Is it the part of consciousness through which that happens, or a choice, or what is that?
Okay, okay. Okay, yeah, I guess I'll also try to answer. I also don't have a full understanding in this regard. But I guess if we look at it, so as you rightly pointed out, yes, the first change that comes about is at the platform of consciousness. Because if we look at it this way, Prabhupada, he repeatedly points out, right, that devotee is liberated even while he is imprisoned within this material body. So it is not that a devotee gets liberated only after quitting the material body. Even while one is living in this material body, we have that verse from where is that verse from? It's from Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu that Eha yasya harer dasya karmana manasagira nikhilashvapyavasthasu jivan muktah sa uchyate. That a person acting in Krishna consciousness, karmana manasagira, with his body, mind, intelligence, and words. So that person is Jivan Mukta. That person is a liberated person, even within the material world, although he may be engaged in many so-called material activities. So obviously, if a person is being called Jivan Mukta, even though one is still in the material world, that means that the liberation has taken place on the platform of consciousness, as you mentioned. So that is the first thing and the most important thing that happens. And then, the body, in one sense, by its very nature, it is perishable. At some or the other point, the body is going to fall apart and perish. And then based on the devotee's spiritual desires, I guess it's different for each individual devotee, but then they attain the specific spiritual destination that is, most suited to them based on their relationship with Krishna, their specific spiritual desires of how they want to serve Krishna, and just all those dynamics, I suppose.
Okay, thank you. So, what I am understanding is, when it comes to devotee is already liberated only in its conscious, in its bodily state also. Am I correct?
Yes, yeah.
So the devotee
Yeah,
is
that's
only,
right.
yeah, so the devotee is only exploring, only trying to find the relation with the Supreme. So it is exploring the Ananda factor. Am I correct?
Yeah. The thing is, one thing which is, the ground reality for many of us, at least, like, speaking for myself, honestly, is also that even though right now we are devotees, but we are not like, fully devotees in the true sense of the term. So that is another factor. So in our case, like in my case, it's
Correct.
not just a lack of the ananda factor, but it's also, just practical material anarthas. There's so much material contamination, gross material contamination that is still existing. So that is another thing which, takes a lot of time to overcome, even though we are right now practicing the
Okay.
devotional path. So, but yeah, philosophically speaking, like a pure devotee is technically already liberated. The material body is just external covering that the devotee is completely detached from already. Like we have, the example of Prabhupada would say, like a dry coconut. So the inside of the coconut, it has already become separated from the shell in a dry coconut. So Prabhupada used to say a pure devotee is like that. The devotee is already completely detached from the material body. That material body is just, it's a superficial external thing that's visible to our eyes, but it doesn't have any actual relation with the devotee.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Mataji.
Thank you, Mataji. I think one thing I always remember when these kind of discussion comes, that this is for pure devotee, like, and pure devotee means like Uttam Adhikari kind of, so not like any of normal jiva in this material world who
Yeah,
can think
yeah,
that
I mean,
okay, that I am a pure devotee because this is a very different high
yes.
state of devotees.
Yeah, you're right,
Mm.
Prabhuji. Like, yeah, that's something to always remind ourselves of.
Yes,
This is the ideal standard. We do have a long way to go right
yes,
now.
yes. I remember in one of the class where when Maharaj was asked similar question and he said, remember after giving the class that this is only for pure devotee. Don't get puffed up that you are having even a tinge of that because you are too far away from that situation.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, anyway, thanks Mataji. We are already 5 minutes over the time and
Yep.
I think there are no any further questions also. So thank you very much for your valuable time and association. With your permission, if it's okay with you, we will close this class now. And
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Thank you so much, everyone. for-
Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Har Grace Gopika Radhika Mataji ki jai, Anant Koti Vaishnav Vrind ki jai, Guru Maharaj ki